Okay, hello. Welcome everybody to the beginning of Nusasonic in Ho Chi Minh City. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Jan Rohlf. I'm from Berlin. I'm organizing CTM Festival there in the city since more than 20 years, and we are one of the partners in this wonderful project, which you probably know is a network of different organizations across Southeast Asia, and then with a hub in Berlin. So namely Wasak Festival in the Philippines, Manila, Yesno Wave in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and Play Freely Black Kachi in Singapore. And now here in Ho Chi Minh City, we're teaming up with Zach and a lot of his friends in his network. So thank you, Zach, for the great work together with us. Yeah, and also thank you, of course, to the Goethe Institute making all of this possible, the Goethe Institute in Jakarta, and especially here in Ho Chi Minh City for hosting us and all the great artists who are joining us. Yeah, so thank you. Today we want to start this festival with a talk and a little lecture introduction by Khyam Allami, who is next to me, and then we will discuss a few of his ideas and the practices of the other artists here on the panel. So yeah, we have Victoria Yam to my left, we have Nursalim Yadi Anugerah and Hoàng Tuấn on the right side. I will introduce them later a little more. The title of this afternoon, evening is Repressed Possibilities, Dismantling Cultural Bias in Sonic Technologies. And, well, I won't explain about it because Khyam will do that, but obviously it's about which influence technology has on how we perceive and produce music, and especially in the light of the different cultural contexts that we are all coming from and working in. So Khyam Allami is a researcher and musician based in Berlin nowadays, but he came across many stations through his life. He was born in Damascus and raised in London, lived in Beirut for a long time, so he has a lot of different experiences in his life. He runs a label called Nava Music, which I can only recommend to check out, and recent years he has dedicated a lot of his time to working and researching the topic he will now speak about, and also in finding practical solutions to some of the problems that he has identified and addresses. Yeah, and maybe I just pass on the microphone to you, Khyam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you again to the organizing team. I would like to start just to give you a general idea of my interests. I'm a musician and a composer and a researcher. I play the oud, which is the Middle Eastern lute. I'm also a drummer. I do some production, work with electronic music, these kinds of things. And for many years, being a musician who is interested in Middle Eastern music practice, Middle Eastern music instruments, compositional forms, but also being interested in electronic music, in music production, etc. I always had a difficult time trying to find a way to be expressive through sonic technologies and digital tools. And one of the main reasons for this conflict, let's say, this friction, was to do with the tonality system that is used in Middle Eastern music, and the difficulty of rendering that tonality system in using the modern production tools. By tonality system, I'm referring to a concept which is often referred to as tuning. And tuning, many people have many different ways to explain it. I like to think of it in a more practical sense of when you are creating an instrument that has melodic possibilities, so pitch content, whether it be a kind of xylophone or a wind instrument or a plucked string instrument, choosing which pitches, which notes that the instrument can produce. And this is a historical issue. It has, taken up many hours of some of the greatest minds throughout history trying to understand the relationship between mathematics and music, the relationships between music and the cosmos in terms of historical cosmology, and obviously the cultural and expressive relationships. And so, sorry, I'll slow down a little bit. For me, this issue became very prominent because even though I was studying oud for many years, I didn't want to live in the past. I wanted to be able to utilize the knowledge, the skills, the conceptual ideas in a way that's relevant to me now, in a way that makes sense to me, both compositionally and sonically. So a big part of this research was really about experimentation. And by experimentation, I don't refer only to experimental music, but I'm talking about the process of asking questions and trying to find those answers and articulate those answers through music, as opposed to through academic literature or any other verbal language-based means. I've always been I've had difficulty expressing myself with language. That's why I like music. That's why I like instrumental music. And so I did a lot of research trying to, find a balance within the asymmetrical leanings of the environment. And for me, one of the asymmetries that became very prominent is that the majority of sonic technologies today, whether we're talking about musical instruments or production tools, plugins, effects, all these other things that are normally put on the side, there is always some fundamental element of their design, of the conceptual design behind the tools that ultimately traces back to Western art music theory. So we're talking about predominantly Anglo-European music from 17th, 18th century. In today's world, when we see tools like Ableton Live or some fancy new synthesizer, it's very difficult for us to make a connection between that and Bach or Chopin or whatever. But actually, this thread is there and is very clear. Predominantly in two ways. You have the equal division of pitch. So this is a tonality system used in Anglo-European music, which is known as 12-tone equal temperament. And then you also have the equal division of time. So many of you maybe know about drum machines that you can program. Drum machines are usually divided into 16 equal steps, 16 equal divisions of time. That time is related to a tempo, which is your beats per minute. And so these two concepts, which make a grid that's both in time and also in pitch, are somehow embedded in the technologies because those technologies are being created by developers and designers who either have a Western Anglo-European market in mind, or that's the musical tradition they come from, and therefore they're continuously referencing back. And I want to make this distinction between the market, because I'm sure we're all aware many of the greatest modern tools have been designed by companies based in Japan or Taiwan or whatever. So companies like Roland, Yamaha, etc. They make really visionary instruments, but somehow catering to a specific market. And for me, the question of tuning opened up all of these questions. Why is it that when we research anything about tuning, the first reference we find is Pythagoras and the Greeks? Is that something that's relevant to us as non-Western art music practitioners? Why is there no mention of ancient Chinese bamboo flute system? Why is there no mention of the ancient Mesopotamian system? Why is there no mention of the 22 Shrutis system from India, etc., etc.? So this kicked off a big research which culminated in me just completing a PhD a few months ago, a doctorate, which was a practice-based PhD in composition, looking at how can one create an experimental music that is relevant to one's individual character and interests, but also culturally situated. And very quickly it became clear to me that this distinction between culture, musical culture, sonic culture, and experimentalism is something that shouldn't exist. Like, they are not mutually exclusive. But then how? It's very easy for us as researchers, academics, to find problems and to say, this is a problem, this is why it's a problem, this is how long it's been a problem, this is who made the problem. But very rarely do we try to produce solutions, or not even solutions, attempts at solutions, things, practical ideas that can somehow represent a different way of thinking. So one major part of my PhD research was a project that has this umbrella title of Apotome, and I'll share with you some clips about that in a minute. I spoke about this project with Jan a few years back, and Jan took a great interest and offered me the opportunity to launch the project through CTM Festival, which is what we did a couple of years ago. And before talking more about that, I just want to share with you a small video clip of some of the creative output that happened during that process. One segment of it is a kind of video essay introduction that I made for the festival. Obviously we were in pandemic time, so much of it was virtual. And as a part of launching the project, and I should mention, I created in collaboration with a design studio called Counterpoint, we created 2 browser-based tools for exploring the subject of tuning and experimental electronic music making. We gave access to these tools to 3 artists: Wahono from Indonesia, Slickback from Nigeria, and Dina Abdelwahed from Tunisia. And we asked each of them to create a half-an-hour performance using these tools within their normal musical workflow. So I'll show you a short 3-minute clip of the introduction and these 3 artists' contributions, and also an extract from a live performance that we did in Berlin, me collaborating with 5 other musicians using the software in real time.
Tuning is one of the most fundamental elements of music making, but it's also the least taught, the least understood, and the most veiled. Do we as musicians know what notes we're playing and why they sound that way? One of the major cultural and individual identifiers of music is tuning and intonation. And even though it's more relevant to non-Western musical cultures, it applies to all music.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is, well, maybe before diving into this, I just will mention how this particular project, the Common Tonalities project, came about. So thanks to the interest that came to the Apotome project, the team at Nusasonic were interested in trying to explore it a little bit further with a focus on Southeast Asia. So I think almost a year ago, November last year, I did a series, so we did an open call, and 20 artists were selected to participate in the workshop, some of whom are with us today, including Victoria and Lynn, and who else is here that was in it? I think that's it, right? Oh, Elisha, sorry, yes. You're too close. So the project was a series of workshops. So we did 3 workshops. Each one was maybe 3 to 4 hours long over a period of 6 weeks. During these workshops, I spoke about these ideas, some of my research, and I shared with all the participants how to analyze musical recordings or their own instruments to figure out and understand what the tuning of them is, and how to input them into this tool called Lima, and then how to use these tuning systems within their own workflows and music-making environments, much the same way as you saw with Wahono and Slickback and Dina Abdul Wahid. As a result of these workshops, each artist made a track, and we released a 20-track compilation album in April this year, which is available on Nusasonic's SoundCloud for free to listen or to download. This was a phenomenal experience for me. It was the first time I was able to share these ideas both theoretically and practically with a group of young artists who were incredibly engaged, had some incredible ideas, and made some really beautiful and very powerful works, I think, that are available on this compilation album that you can all listen to. To give you a quick idea of how it might work, whilst I was doing all the research, Wahono, who plays in a group called Oval Masa from Jakarta in Indonesia, sent me this video of, sent me this video of this slompret performer, and asked me to analyze the tuning of the slompret so that he could use the tuning in his work. So I'll play you a quick extract. So yeah, I took the audio from this video, I analyzed and understood what the tuning system was, and then plugged it into Lima, and so now the sound that you're hearing here is very simple. It's just a simple triangle wave synthesizer sound, but there is the option to output this as MIDI data and then use it with hardware or software synthesizers. So the idea of the tool is to allow access, right, to allow choice, rather than forcing the musicians to deal with all the workarounds and the hurdles and the compromises that very often have to be made. And once a tuning system is inside Lima, then it goes into a database which can be accessed through another tool called Apotome, which is the name of the project. And Apotome is a generative music environment that runs in the web browser. And its essential concept is that it can create generative music based on any tuning system that you have inputted into it. The reason why I decided to create a generative music environment rather than a normal sequencer is because this idea of experimentalism is very close to my heart. And as musicians, whether we are well versed in a specific culture or not, we tend generally to do the same things. We gravitate towards similar sounds, we play similar kinds of melodic formations. There's a muscle memory that develops in us, and there's an aural memory that develops in us while we're listening, while we're studying, while we're practicing. And the beauty of generative systems is that you can tell the software the things that you like, but then it will do its own thing. And you will hear things that are unexpected. The more you work with it, the more you learn how to add more control and more details. But what's valuable about it for me is just letting it run and having a reference for things that you won't normally hear. That doesn't mean that what comes out of it you would render as a piece of music and use it, although you can. But what's really interesting is just letting it play and tweaking small details and slowly hearing things that are unexpected, therefore filling your subconscious with things that you might not have any other way to experience, and then letting that filter through how we make music. And I find this to be a very inspiring way because it keeps us within a cultural situation that's meaningful for us, and obviously it's different from person to person, but it can also generate new ideas and help us hear differently. So it's a way to unlearn and relearn and explore some of these ideas. This is a small composition I made before, based on some of the tunings that Wahono sent to me. So I'll just play you a short extract so you can see the software running. This is running in real time using built-in web synthesizers, some of which don't have interfaces. But the beauty about the web browser is that it's very accessible for anybody. It doesn't use a lot of data, and you can output MIDI from it too, so you could run this into Ableton Live or any other hardware or software synthesizers. You saw Dina Abdelwahed using it earlier with some of her hardware synths. So I just quickly play you an example here. Just look for the flashing lights and you'll see what's working. Can everybody see okay? This part down here is the structure, and you'll see it jumping from one part to another. Thank you. So on. This is a bit more of a controlled composition. You can hear it's just moving from step to step. But we can also do fun things like to randomize some of the parameters here. I'll just do it again for fun. I won't randomize this because otherwise it will change the tuning system. And now if I play it again, we hear something very different. So there's something about the intent of what I did before now is a little bit modified. And so if we do again, this is all based on the same tuning, but the synthesizer sounds are changing, the energy is changing. One more. It's quite fun checking your email while playing this in the background. Yeah. So yeah, the launch of the project was very exciting. This article in Pitchfork magazine was published around the time of the festival, and it created a bit of a buzz, also a lot of critique of people feeling very triggered. This idea of decolonizing electronic music was very triggering for people, mostly in Europe and the US, of course. But it was great because it started this conversation. You know, people started responding with things like, how can you say Ableton Live is racist? It's just a software. And obviously, this is not what I was saying, right? One thing that people really struggled to understand is that this is not a problem of technology. This is a problem of perspective. It's a problem of design. It's a problem of choice. So then it's also a problem of supremacy. Because if you have one group of people who are controlling the design of tools that are ultimately exported all over the world, and that those tools don't provide choice for the users, then there's an imposition. And that imposition ultimately goes back to the idea that there is a supremacy in Western art music, and the idea that Western art music theory is superior to any other music theory because we have Wagner, because we have Chopin, because we have Mozart, etc., etc. And unfortunately, as much as I respect that music, I don't believe this is true in any way, shape, or form. I can listen to whatever, Erik Satie or Charles Ives or Stockhausen, and then listen to Alim Qasimov from Azerbaijan and feel actually more excited. This is my personal opinion. But trying to break down this concept that musical culture and experimentalism are not mutually exclusive, and that Western art music theory is not the superior musical, fundamental, theoretical paradigm, has been very difficult, right? But it has been fun also, and as you will hopefully see after tomorrow when we do our performance, I'm sure you'll feel the energy in how many young people, young artists with a real drive and many great ideas are equally attracted to these concepts. And during this project, particularly the Nusasonic project, what became very clear to me is all we're missing is access. All we're missing is some tools. All we're missing is some of the research. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to create something in order to share was to not come across as the angry Arab musician who is, angry with the world and technology makers for not giving him space. Actually, we need to be more active. We need to stop being passive. We need to stop being consumers and really push what we're creating. Because ultimately, the technology can do everything. I won't go into the details of it, but these kinds of capabilities have been available since the 90s. And if the web browser can do this now, it would have been able to do it 5-10 years ago also. Why these things don't exist is not a problem of technology. It's a problem of perspective. It's a problem of research. It's a problem of agency, I think. This idea of desire. We all have desires, but it's very rare that we might actually take the desire by the hand and go somewhere with it. This has been the main kind of idea I'm trying to share, that it is possible. You don't need a lot of money. You just need to have the drive and the desire and the agency to make it happen. So I'm super excited to pass the mic on to Jan and Yadi and Victoria and Huang, so we can hear about some of their experiences and have this conversation together. Before that, I really want to encourage you to join us on the 8th at the Dance Academy down the road for the performance that will be a result of the new workshop we're doing tomorrow in person with 14 artists from across Southeast Asia, including many from here, from Ho Chi Minh City. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope to see you there.
Yeah, so we wait a little bit until Victoria is back, but thank you, Khyam. I think you really managed super well to raise awareness to this important topic, that there is no such thing as neutral technology, and you explained it also very well, that it's really about the access and the possibility that pieces of technology come from many places and many different perspectives. And so we can negotiate all these different ideas and perspectives. But one thing that was very striking to me when we spoke about your project was when you told the story also about the MIDI technology and how it came to life. Maybe I thought maybe you can elaborate a bit on that, but because this shows so clearly where the limitations are actually coming from.
So this may be a bit technical for some of you, but I will try to clarify. In the mid-20th century, when electric musical instruments were being developed, and then we had synthesizers, such as Moog synthesizers, maybe you've heard of them. All of those synthesizers were based on a modular concept. So you would plug one section into another section manually and choose what kind of sound and what kind of intonation you wanted. At one point in the 80s, when it was very clear that this is a huge change in music making and that there was a huge market waiting to be explored, the heads of two companies, Dave Smith from Dave Smith Instruments in the US and Ikutaro Takehashi from Roland in Japan, decided that there needed to be a new language designed to allow the instruments from different manufacturers to speak to each other. The original idea was synchronization. So how to synchronize a Roland drum machine with a Dave Smith or Prophet synthesizer so that you can have the LFOs running at the same tempo or something like that. And the research for this led to what we now call today MIDI, Musical Instrument Digital Interface. This particular digital language is at the core of all music making hardware and the majority of music making hardware and software. And it's a way to communicate between different devices. It's a way to define certain parameters. And when it was first made, it was made as based on 12-tone equal temperament and equal divisions of time. In 1990, there was a new element added to MIDI called MIDI tuning standard. And this is a message, a small message that can be transmitted from one device to another that can tell the instrument what tonality system, what tuning system to play in. And this was developed mostly actually in the US by a musician and composer whose name is Robert Rich, in collaboration with another musician composer called Carl Schultz. And when this was designed, obviously the design went to Roland so that Roland could approve it because it was being made by both companies. And Roland insisted on a modification of this message that would be easier for modal tuning systems from around the world. So rather than having a tuning system that had to be 128 notes, because that's the maximum you have in MIDI. They wanted something that would only be 12 notes and would be repeated in all the different octaves. So they were thinking about how to make it easier and more accessible for musicians. But, so like I said, this has existed in MIDI since 1991, but it's very rarely implemented. And the reason why is because nothing about the MIDI language is compulsory for any manufacturer to use. So many manufacturers chose to completely dismiss this capability because they think it's not necessary. Because they think, well, music is 12-tone equal temperament, and therefore there's no need to have any other access. And this is something I think that illustrates this point very well, that 40 years, 30 years later, we're still here having this conversation. You know.
Yeah, exactly. That was what I meant. Thank you. Yeah, so let's move on to Victoria next to me here. She's a music producer, from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And the music that you do is mostly electronic, strong foot in contemporary expressions of club culture, I would say. And you also work as an editor, a music editor for a new magazine for young girls, it's called, which is highlighting female voices in Southeast Asia and Southeast Asian diaspora, which is a great project, I think. Yeah, and you have been participating in the Common Tonalities project. So to start with, I just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about your experience in the project, what idea you developed there, and what was the process for you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So when I was a lot younger, my parents sent me for classical piano lessons. But I hated it. So instead, I grew very fascinated with using household items, such as Tupperwares, which are food storage containers. And I would arrange them according to their sizes and shapes, and I would play them with the chopsticks. And then when I picked up the guitar, after learning a while, I started detuning them, and I would listen to how one string would harmonize with the other string by strumming them while I was detuning it. So then I realized that the spirit of experimentation, I've always had it since young. So when I picked up producing electronic music on a software DAW, I felt like a magician because I was able to manipulate sounds and samples by glitching them, by adding layers of effects, by changing the pitch. So I grew very deeply connected to my laptop. And the first software DAW I actually used was GarageBand. I remember I was using loops, and I would record my vocals and I would slice them according to the rhythm of the drums. But as I grew more and more involved with the local electronic scene, I realized that a lot of the sound design and also a lot of the composition ideas were all in like the Western lens of what dance music was. And that as a young producer, I wanted to explore more beyond that. I wanted to know more about tuning systems and also sound design that exists outside of the tonal systems that I knew then. So because of that, I started experimenting more with noises. Can play the first track that I played. Yeah, so in this track, I experiment with unlearning tonal systems, and also sound design, and I wanted to like crush the domination of like Western dance rhythm in my electronic music. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the beginning of it's okay. So that was the beginning of my exploration of producing electronic music outside of Western composition ideas. And so as I got more involved with the experimental electronic music scene in Southeast Asia, I wanted to confront my cultural roots as well by exploring the sound design that exists outside of the Western tunings. Because I was so interested in sound designing in like music production, and I realized that there is a vast the Southeast Asian experimental musicians are vast, and it's always something new that I'm listening to. And so when I got involved with the residency led by Khyam, it was very rewarding for me as a young producer, because I was able to explore my own country's like traditional tunings. For example, the next video that I'll be showing is an instrument called the rebab. And the rebab is a string instrument that is used in northern Malaysia, in Kelantan especially. It's a pre-Islamic tradition, and this instrument is used in a ritual healing ritual called the Makyong, which is banned currently in Malaysia. And so I was very interested in this instrument because it sounds very, very magical. So I'll be playing the video. So with Khyam's guidance, I used Melodyne to analyze the rebab's tuning, and then also using Lima. And then once I've analyzed the tuning, I exported the scale tuning, the scales and the tunings into my software DAW, and then I integrated it in my digital synthesizers. And also I would tune the beat according, like the drum samples according to the pitch. And yeah, and ever since I feel I've grown a lot as a musical artist as well, because I'm now exploring sound design that is very much personal to me. Yeah, so I think I'll play the next track, which is the track that I've produced for Common Tonalities. Yeah, so thank you very much. So all of that was done digitally on my software DAW using a MIDI keyboard as well. Yeah, so thank you very much, Khyam. That's all I have. Thank you.
Victoria, am I right that the first track that you played was more sample-based?
than the track that you made for
correct, yeah.
So was it that at that time you were facing the limitations of audio software environments and sampling was basically the workaround to do the tunings that you wanted?
That's true. When I first experimented with sound design, I would download like cinematic samples, usually the eerie horror ones, because they were often like very out of tune, and I would like play around with the pitching. But I still felt limited because I couldn't make melodies out of that. It was just like noise. But when I learned about Lima and using the tuning and scales, I was able to create melodies and also improve my musical knowledge and also skill, producing.
Can I jump in on that point quickly? One thing that's really exciting for me, which became very apparent during the first phase of the Nusasonic workshop, is what we're getting to here is actually something that helps us build upon, and move forward from sampling. So you heard the Rabab extract. Before, what we would probably do is take that audio as a sample and put your beats on it, change the length, change the pitch or something, but manipulate that fixed audio recording. What these techniques and these ideas are allowing us to do is to analyze somehow the essence of that instrument or of that particular performance, that moment in time, regardless of whether it's fully representative of a musical culture or not. So we're no longer trapped into this idea that everything needs to be quantifiable. So there isn't one tuning system that represents all of Malaysia or all of the Arab-speaking region or all of Vietnam. We can take one performance by one single musician of a specific instrument and a specific musical style and absorb that, analyze it, learn from it, somehow be able to understand the essence and then create something of our own, which is something Jan and I were talking about earlier, which we hopefully will come to in a minute, this idea of transmission, right? Of developing upon a knowledge that you are engaged with somehow, but using your own voice and using tools that are somehow relevant to your own experience.
Yeah, well put. Maybe I can move on to Nursalim Yadi Anugerah then in the next step. Yadi is a composer and instrumentalist, multi-instrumentalist, based in Pontianak in Kalimantan, Indonesia. And in his works he on the one hand connects and explores a lot of the local musical traditions, also oftentimes in contact with indigenous communities in the region where you live, and also using the exchange with them and your art and your music to highlight ecological and political issues around the destruction, I would say, of the ecosystem and the cultural systems in Kalimantan. But on the other hand, you also have a classical, Western classical education in music, and you also do projects where these worlds connect or contrast or step into a dialogue with each other. And I guess at the heart of such work, the tuning question will be a central question that you have to face in many of your projects.
Looks so difficult, yeah. Hello, my name is Yadi. You can call me Yadi. I'm from Kalimantan, as Jan said. Actually, also facing a lot of issues, not only in the cultural thing, but also devastation in the forests and everything's there, a resource. And also we are facing also new thing like a move of the new capital to Kalimantan, to Borneo especially. So there's a lot of issues. Also coming into the indigenous community, that also in this like 10 years, since last 10 years we are working with. One of them is I'm working with the musicians and the community that with the mouth organ. I think it's in Southeast Asia, also like in Vietnam, we have a lot of mouth organ also here. And there's There's also my friend Junichi Usui. He's also a musician and researcher with the mouth organ. So like we are sharing many things together. My instrument in my island, we call it kadedek. But it comes with a lot of names like Angkerurai, Keluri in here. Also in Chinese, they have a sheng, also show, and they distribute a lot in here. But what makes me interesting is to see that in Indonesia especially, we don't talk a lot about our cultural heritage, our musical heritage, especially since the new order of Suharto's regime, like everything centralized in Java. So we don't know each other in Kalimantan or Borneo. We don't know how's our musical traditions. We just know our tradition as a commodity to sell for a touristing and something, but never really dig into that thing. So that's why me and my college in Pontianak, we developed, we found our ensemble, because I also realized that we don't have space or a ways to develop our artistic thing or to amplify our voice, especially through political things and music. So through this thing, we can work in the artistic thing, like one that I mentioned before is a mouth organ thing. Maybe I will show the instrument so you can have a image about that instrument. Yeah, actually this one is the new work, so it sounds weird maybe. Later we'll talk about this. Yeah, I mean like I found this instrument is very personal, like it's representing also our breath, and also it's very limited. So we are also very limited there, the ways to express our artistic thing. But we found this instrument, like one instrument is only have a 5 or 6 pipes. And it can represent one pipes, they produce one pitch. So it's only that. But then we have a bunch of mouth organs, like every mouth organ, they have a different pitch. So sometimes it's also difficult to organize that in the ensemble thing, especially in the new work. So for example, this work, I have the score that maybe is not really tell us about the oh, I think so. The first page, I think. No, I mean like just some image about this instrument. So it's like a 6 pipes. So it's the like just analogy in the Western CD. Sometimes you can see the pitch is like that, sort of, but it's never really like that. And then if this one mouth organs like this, then we have a lot of like, let's say 5 mouth organs in different pitch. It's sometimes so difficult to organize it, because when you say C, it's not really C. When you say it, even even your C and my C is not our C together. We can see together. Or I can see you. So that's can I? Yeah. Basically, this is just our instruction together. Like, if there's a 4 more mouth organs, there's a 4 sets of the pitch in the same scale. You can see there's in the music like this major second and then minor third, always repeating like that. And then we try to exploring the possibility. We only then we decide we cannot write it like if we have like 20 mouth organ, we always transport it. Make a transposition to the score is kind of difficult and overwhelming. So in our practice, in our ensemble, we just say like this is first for the first pipes, and the second is the same like I think in many traditions also same style like in gamelan also, yeah. And also actually in the indigenous people they never refer to the pitch, but they refer to the name of the pipes or the name of the roll of the like a gamelan sometimes. That's why if you see that kind of the number 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like a sequence of the possibilities of the pipes that we can play together in our duration of the breath. So sometimes it's like we can see together, we can meet together, and then we can crush each other, turbulence that produce the possibilities acoustically. And it's very interesting for us to see the richness of the harmonies and the noise together, especially I mean like this, for example, just a reference of the pitch. Sometimes it's also different. This instrument can play exhale and inhale, but also in one pitch sometimes exhale also different, slightly inhale. So even it's complicated, and also it's interesting colors also in the timbre for each pipes. So how we play is we didn't refer to the like a score as a we just make it like a more like a scheme. We do this and then some instruction for as before the pipes number, and then move into this score, and then they have some notes in the score. So basically, we are in the video before you saw. This is the score. So we are doing this in our duration, and then meet each other. This is the one example that I showed you how we do that in the. How's that? I want to show, my point is I want to show another ways. Maybe you showed before. It's, the one works, yes. Yeah, and this work is a different approach, like interpret. Thank you. Yeah, where I work with acoustically, but also with the machine. So each pipes, each mouth organ, there are, as I said before, they have 5 pipes. So each pipes they have one kinetic installation with the servo motor, so they can manage to close the hole to stop the air and sounds. But also we manage the number of the wind that distribute to the mouth organ. In this way, we can enhance the possibilities of the instrument, because before us, if you play it by acoustically by your mouth, it only can be played like 20 minutes or 30 minutes because it's getting wet, and then the pitch is getting lower and lower, and you cannot play, and then you have to wait and stop 30 minutes and play again. So yeah, we have to dry. We have to wait. So by this kind of installation, we try to break that rules and see the colors of the possibilities. If you push the more wind and the more thing into that, you got the possibilities, new possibilities, interesting spectrum in the pitch that you get, and then yeah, I will show you some like this is like the sketch of the patch before us. Yeah, mostly I'm working more. I rarely work with the DAW thing, but I'm prefer to work on my way to develop my system with my ensemble. So this one is the patch of this. Basically, they transform the MIDI command to the kinetic installation there. Yeah, and yes, same like this. This is a possibility of the pitch that we have, and I mean like this is another thing. I mean like we try to analyze. I'm also now working with still with this installation, but with string quartet. I found that the string instrument is very flexible to find the very. Basically, I also play cello. Then I found through like this something between A and G sharp. So it's not 440 or for whatever that. And if we analyze this harmonic series, and we can manipulate that like maybe like this, just the snapshot of the max patch, that through this thing we can later work the another thing like a string instrument, and then or the electronic thing that basically the harmonic series is like producing the same pitch of the mouth organ. So we can work on this only one pitch to the composition or to the another instrument or another technology, I think. I think that's all from me. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Yadi. This was another example of how to connect these different instrumental traditions, let's say, and their capabilities by expanding in this example with electromechanics, so to say. You do, of course, a quite big range of projects, including a lot of vocal performance as well. Is there maybe any other project that you want to tell a bit about, how you facilitated this dialogue between different musical cultures from different places?
Yeah, since last year and actually also last month, we are working with our my opera. It's like an intercultural opera. So we found like the famous Wagner Wagner opera, The Rings. We have a similar thing with our indigenous culture heritage. So we found it very interesting, and we used like something like a comparative mythology. And we found these two materials is very interesting, and we put it in the dialogue together. And in this thing, I'm working with the opera singers. That's very strong skills with the operatic, Western operatic, and then Wagnerian, and also with the musicians from our community. So basically, we are making music through Wagner compositions and put it in the dialogue together with our cultural heritage. So it's they have a lot of dialogue to mix the thing all together. I mean, like basically, we are also using mouth organ as the basic of this composition, but then we have like a 15 set of the tuning of the during the performance. So like if this play and the singers also will like we do that virtually in the process. That is also challenging, and then we train them to work with our instrument, especially with the timbre. Also, it's very difficult to predict that, but it's so how's that? It's difficult, but it's so fruitful dialogue. So we can listen each other, and then put more how's that? Awareness about the empathy of what we have each other. There's some video I think I have here to show you.
But this is mainly or purely acoustic music.
Yeah, this one is purely acoustic.
Mm-hmm.
The last one. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Do you actually also work with electronic production tools, or would you see the approaches that Khyam has presented as something you could find useful to integrate into your practice?
Yeah, actually I just explored also Lema Patom also. I found that also will be very fruitful to expand the possibilities with the especially the mouth organ tuning that I have. And yeah, as I said, I'm not really often work with something like electronic stuff, but I do that for processing like electroacoustic thing. But I saw this is the possibilities. It's very interesting for my future approach in the artistically.
I just want to jump in on something here to ask you a question. but also to bring up an idea. Most of the time, when people hear about electronic tools or digital tools for music making, everybody assumes that the tool itself must be used for a fixed purpose. But what's interesting for me about the tools that we built is actually they can be used to just prototype an idea. And this is where we get to the question of imagination, right, and the imaginary. With a project like Yadi's that we just saw now, one would have to have an intimate connection with the instrument and an expanded training, I guess, in a particular compositional style or a music theory, to be able to imagine a possibility of creating a mechanical system for the mouth organs. And then to prototype the idea, you will need to either learn how to code a max patch and do the coding, or find the money to build the mechanical devices and prototype the thing. But with something like Apotome, you're able to, while checking your email, quickly prototype an idea and see, does this idea feel good? Will it lead to somewhere? And so I wanted to ask you about your prototyping process for the mechanical composition we heard earlier. How was your imaginary process? When did you think of that idea, and how did you try to prototype it to bring it to life?
Yeah, since basically I'm working in acoustically, and then I found it's many things like I have to push like the instrument not to produce, but to push the limitation of the instrument, and then since also in one pitch as also I showed before, like there's a lot of possibilities, the colors in one pitch, even exhale or inhale, and that's layer I need to discover more the possibilities that I'm not really found the way how to represent it in into the more artistic way. So I think there's need some tools that we can work on it. I think I don't know its answer, but I think that that's what I think about this.
Thank you. So moving on to Hoàng Tuấn. Hoàng Tuấn is an accomplished master of various forms of traditional music here in Vietnam, based in Hue, which I learned is the former capital of Vietnam, and hence a very important place from which certain musical forms have originated and also kept alive and practiced today. And so Hoàng is working mainly with traditional acoustic instruments, but he's also interested in the transmission from these old practices into contemporary newer practices involving also other tools of music making, electronic and digital tools, and this also in his capacity as a teacher as well, so working with students and working on the idea or on the necessity of keeping heritage alive, of preserving these traditions in the country. And so I would like to ask Hoàng Tuấn first to introduce his practice a bit from his own perspective, so we get to know the details of what you're doing.
Xin chào mọi người. Mình xin phép nói tiếng Việt và có sẽ hỗ trợ bằng tiếng Anh. Mình là Hoàng Tuấn, đến từ Huế, người thực hành âm nhạc truyền thống. Công việc của mình là công việc chính với giảng dạy, bảo tồn và phát huy những cái giá trị về âm nhạc về truyền thống. Phát huy ở đây có thể mang tính lan tỏa, và phát huy ở đây cũng có thể là mang tính đưa cái không gian âm nhạc truyền thống và kết hợp với một số các bạn thực hành hay là vào cả không gian.
I'd like to introduce myself. I'm sorry that I cannot speak English. My name is Hoàng Tuấn and I am from Huế City. I am a traditional music practitioner. Currently, I am doing music preservation, teaching and performance as in organizing traditional music performance and also to incorporate traditional music into different kind of modern music.
Trong cái công việc này của mình có một điều thú vị á, là mình vừa là người bảo tồn nhưng mình là cũng người là đứng vô cái hàng ngũ tiên phong để đưa cái âm nhạc truyền thống ấy vào các cái không gian thể nghiệm. Cũng có thể bởi vì cái thú vị ở đây nữa là công việc bảo tồn thì mình sẽ đi ngược lại với thời gian, về mình có thể quay lại một cái không gian âm nhạc truyền thống ấy về thế kỷ 18, 19 để cho nó phù hợp với cái đời sống của đấy. Và ngược lại còn không gian âm nhạc của thể nghiệm á, thì mình phải nói lên được cái tâm tư tình cảm của chúng ta. Bây giờ thì cái công việc mình thấy là rất là linh hoạt.
What I find the most interesting in my job is to play as a connection point of traditional and modern music. For the preservation, I'd like to take my students back into the history, to the 18th and 19th centuries, to make them understand the origin of our music industry. And then from there, I also like to experiment different ways of bringing the traditional music into modern days, how to express ourselves using the traditional music.
Và trong cái quá trình thể nghiệm ấy thì mình là rất được quen biết mọi người, và cũng có do mình đã đi cùng thể nghiệm cùng các bạn ở đây, cho nên hôm nay đó là lý do mình đã có mặt ở đây.
And the work brings me to many opportunities, and I make friends. And coming to this event is one of the opportunity when I want to introduce to you my traditional music and have you to feel it through this chance.
Okay, so maybe you can tell us a little bit how you, with working with students or with your own performance, how do you actualize the tradition with what kind of tools do you work? Have you faced limitations such as Khyam was departing from to build his project, and do you see such ideas as Khyam expressed as potentially helpful for your own practice?
Về âm nhạc truyền thống của chúng tôi cũng rất là phong phú về cái hệ thống thang âm. Qua nếu như mà trong cái hệ thống thang âm của người Việt chúng tôi thì có thể hệ thống thang âm của phía Bắc, miền Trung và miền Nam, chưa kể cả của thang âm của thiểu số, nếu như mà được đồng bộ và hỗ trợ của như của anh Khyam á, thì mình nghĩ đó là cái kho tài liệu nó khá phong phú. Và dễ để có các bạn có thể dễ tiếp cận hơn, thay vì các bạn có thể tới một học viện, tới từng học viện hay để học các cái nhạc cụ truyền thống, thì thay vì mình chỉ cần truy cập vào cái kho dữ liệu ấy thôi là mình đã có thể là mình đã đi đến các cái vùng miền này để mình tiếp cận được cái âm nhạc truyền thống của chúng ta ở đây.
So in Vietnam, in the traditional music, we have different tuning systems and scales. The northern people, southern people, and ethnic people have their own systems. And in my teaching, I often have to send my students to the locations to explore the instruments, to actually have a sense of the tuning system. But I think with this tool, I can provide my students with more accessibility, where they can learn and they can explore different tuning system much more easier.
Và đương nhiên nó cũng sẽ có những cái giới hạn nhất định, theo tôi là như thế. Ví dụ như cái giới hạn âm nhạc của người Việt chúng tôi thì đi kèm theo những cái văn hóa, Ví dụ như âm nhạc nó dành cho giai điệu nó dành cho những cái lễ hội gì hay là dành cho cái âm nhạc tín ngưỡng gì thì nó sẽ kèm theo cái không gian của đấy. Còn khi mà mình truy cập vào cái kho dữ liệu ấy thì mình mới tìm được những cái giai điệu ấy thôi. Mình vẫn chưa tìm hiểu sâu được cái văn hóa của loại hình âm nhạc đấy.
But also from my teaching experience, the traditional music in Vietnam often has a religious or cultural origin, such as the piece of music that serves a ceremony or a festival in particular. And if they find the tuning system in the browser, in the tool, they can listen to it, but without the environment. So that is one limitation that I can identify.
Và tôi cũng làm điều nhờ tương tự như vậy thì mình sẽ phát triển những cái giai điệu truyền thống ấy bằng một cái bản nhạc mới. Sau khi các bạn sinh viên hay là các người nghe nhạc của tôi nói ủa sao bài này nó đâu mà hay, có vẻ gần gũi thế, thì mình lại quay ngược lại giới thiệu bài này sẽ xuất phát ở một cái lễ hội này, đi kèm với một cái lễ hội.
But I think when the students hear a piece of music or a set of notes, they find it familiar. If they access to the music through the tool and they ask me about it, I can explain to them much more easier about the background of the music, where it originates from, what is the purpose of this piece of music. So it is a good start to have them wonder.
Bây giờ chúng ta có thể nghe một bài mà tôi và lấy cái chất liệu của một cái truyền thống để phát triển thành một cái bài độc lập, một tác phẩm độc lập.
I want to introduce a piece of.
Mình sẽ xem cho các bạn xem một video tiếp theo để xem mình sẽ lấy chất liệu âm nhạc này từ một văn hóa gì của người Việt của chúng ta.
This is developed with the material as the traditional style of music, and now I want you to show you a video so you can understand better the origin.
Đó là có thể một trong những rất là nhiều chất liệu của âm nhạc truyền thống của chúng ta, mà nếu như được số hóa nó, được chi tiết hóa từng cái nhạc cụ, từng cái giai điệu, từng cái thang âm của việc, thì tôi nghĩ là mình sẽ có một cái kho rất là phong phú mà dễ tiếp cận hơn cả các bạn trẻ, người trẻ, hoặc là những cái nhạc sĩ mà người ta mong muốn sử dụng bằng computer để làm nhạc.
So I see it as one of many raw materials from the traditional music of Vietnam, and with the tool, I think we can analyze the scales, the tuning system, and have the young artists to access to a much broader and diversified archive where they can learn and they can also exploit as a database, a warehouse for their work.
Yeah, of course, Khyam.
Thank you so much, Hoàng Tuấn. This question of context has been very important for me. For one main reason, which is right now we don't have any literature or any resources that can allow us access to information about tuning systems from any specific area or even around the globe, with contextual information, with information about where the details come from. And I want to show you something very simple that's in Lima. When you choose a system or you input something in the database, you're able to do an explanation of what it is, but also add the source. And the source can also be a URL. My idea at the moment is that we will be able to develop the tool into a legitimate database with a kind of peer review process, so that anybody can submit a tuning system plus the contextual information, and then once it's checked it can be published. Therefore we avoid this idea of a kind of colonialist enterprise of collecting. Okay, this isn't just about collecting as much data and creating a database, but more about providing meaningful access to information and allowing those who create or research or submit the details to actually share with us more than just the tuning. If I was able to see your video whilst being able to play the tuning in time with my keyboard while checking my email, then I would feel closer to the content, in much the same way as what happened with this Slompret video earlier. We could play it and play along at the same time, and by having access to information that gives more context, then there's a deeper understanding and a deeper engagement, and ultimately a deeper respect for where this comes from and the freedom that it allows. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on that, having the access to a specific piece of knowledge, of course, does not deride anybody from the responsibility to be respectful to the context of where this piece of knowledge comes from. So it always stays on the individual to do that. But if structurally, as Khyam says, we can provide resources and tools that give you this possibility of a respectful engagement and a deeper knowledge, then we could hope, at least, that more people will have this respectful attitude. And maybe that brings me also to this point of, I would believe that with the limitations that we're speaking about today, with the hegemony of the 12-tone equal temperament, and all the music that globally is produced and churned out daily through all kinds of channels to our ears, people of course also lose or never learn the ability to differentiate and to actually listen in a specific way. So I would think that through the work such as Huang, for example, does, and maybe with tools like Khyam's, there can be, as you said, an unlearning and a relearning of that listening. And then with such a listening that might come through contemporary alterations of traditions in the first place, because we're young people, we live in the present, we're interested to respond to the present moment. But with this experience, then hopefully more people would also engage with the deep roots where things are coming from, and with the older forms, and learn or gain better understanding. And I guess that your work is exactly aiming at that, Huang, as much as I understood. Yeah? You want to add to it? No? No. Okay. Well, I don't know, maybe this gives us a good moment to open up to all of you here in the room and to take some questions to the people on the panel. If you have any, we will be happy to pass on the microphone to you. Yeah, over there. Maybe we take one of those. There's an additional one. Okay.
So, hello. Thank you very much. My name is Ricardo. I come from Colombia. It's in South America. And it's been very interesting what you have been showing here. And it happens, these kind of discussions, of course, is happening all over. In so many places, so it's really necessary, it's really important to connect, to know that all these tools, for example, are happening and can create a bigger understanding of what happens. Music happens to be so resilient, and even if the tools tell you this is the way, there is always a new way or many ways to create new things and new connections. Yeah, even if you don't speak the same language, you can connect through the music, through all things that happens around as well. Now, these ideas of Eastern, Western are by themselves colonial ways of looking at the world and showing, for example, how artificial this is, how imprecise this is. Say, for example, Latin America is not Eastern, is not Western, doesn't exist in this very odd way of understanding. And I see, for example, here you say Western experimental, so keeps repeating the same labels. Is there, I have two questions actually. One, is there a discussion about different ways of using these expressions that doesn't fall in the same situation over and over, applying this? And in the second, is there now an ongoing project that willing to have a more global experience with music in Latin America? Because I have to say, in Latin America, not only we have the native Aboriginal people who comes actually from Asia during the Ice Age to America, but also when the Spanish went, and then the French, and then England, and even Palestinian people, we have everybody of us in Latin America are mestizo, yeah, from all over the world. And it happens also with the music. So we have the music from the Aboriginal people with so many wonderful tuning systems and rhythms with complex rhythm structures, and also the modulation itself, another issue to add there. But also this mixture that happens from Africa, from all over. So these are two questions. One about the language, and second about the ongoing projects.
Thank you very much. There are two really important points. The first thing about terminology is something that has been very important, and I should add has changed, like I have changed throughout the project. You made a really nice observation there about Western experimental. A few people brought this up when we first launched the project. Why is the tuning categorization by geography? This was a choice I made early because it's very difficult to introduce people to this subject without something that can guide, towards some kind of familiarity. And I do want to change it. But I would like to change it to something that's much more dynamic, which is more complicated because it needs more research. What I imagine, for example, is something like a tagging system where you could search or click by instrument, by specific tonalities, intervals, by specific regions or cities where things come from, as well as countries or even musicians' names, anything that's available in the contextual information. I think this is going to make things much richer. But what has changed for me since starting this project is I stopped using the term microtonality to talk about tuning, because microtonality is a European conception that tried to differentiate between folk musics and ethnic musics and Western art music, and to create something for their own, which the Anglo-European composers. And this, again, is a very othering, because if you speak to Anglo-European composers about microtonality, I've seen this happen multiple times, and you say, well, I'm from Iraq, or I'm from Iran, or I'm from Colombia, and we play with microtonal pitches all the time. Everybody's like, oh yeah. And then they move on and they want to talk about quarter tone systems or 37 equal divisions of the octave or whatever. The other term that's changed for me is stop to saying Western, specifically because of the comment that you made, to stop saying America for the USA, to try to be more precise, and also to think about an Anglo-European culture that has imposed itself, rather than just to say the West, because you're very right. I mean, it's not only Colombia, Brazil, all the other Latin Americas are so valuable, and the musical knowledge that's there is super valuable. Regarding your second question about connections, this is a long process. And it's something that has to be done, but it's something that needs to be done on a communal level. And this is why projects like Nusasonic are so valuable for me, because through this project now I have connections with researchers and artists in the Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Burma, Brunei. There's so many places, and allows this conversation to happen and then hopefully to develop. And I'm trying to figure out something similar for the African continent and the Americas as well, but you can imagine as one person it's difficult. But I'm trying my best, and it's really on my mind. I have a friend in Berlin who plays many of the Colombian flutes. We're going to sit down and go through recording some of those, analyzing, pulling out some resources. But this is also where we fall into a trap of access because of the language. Many of the Latin American research is in local languages, and so if I don't have access to the language, it's difficult. So again, it's about trying to develop partnerships, etc. And I see this project as a long burner. It wasn't designed in the first place as a fireworks show and a decolonial project. It's designed as something that can grow over time, and I just hope that I can find the resources to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any further question from the audience? Then please raise your hand. Yeah? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Thierry. I'm French, but I'm living in Vietnam for a very long time now. I've got a question toward the Indonesian pipe. When I was listening to it, is there this the communities to play with this instrument? Is that relating to the dronic aspect of it, or is there more like a usage toward the like arpeggios or melodies? Because it was very sustained sound, drones, and it makes me think about the traffic, the horns in the traffic here in Vietnam, in fact. So.
Thank you. Yeah, basically it's also depends in which communities. Actually, in Kalimantan they have, it's almost extinct, but there still have some communities that play that. This one, my teacher is from Kebahan community. That's called Kebahan community. It's different ways to play with same instrument with another community, especially like Kayan people. If another place, they play more repetitive and more drone system. But in Kebahan community, they play more melodically, and the pattern even repetitive, but they more have more variation into that. So it also depends on the community, and I found also interesting to see that also depend on the house the people communicate or speaks using the language. I mean, like it's also, for example, as I mentioned before, Kayan community, Kayan people talk more like they use the vocal pronunciation is more longer, sometimes it's slower than another community. So another one is more fast, so more variation into the music. So it's also, I found it's very interesting to see how they communicate and then their musical expression. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, one more chance to ask a question to our panelists. One more there, yeah, great.
Well, first of all, thank you all for the presentations. And excuse me in advance if I, have lack of knowledge. But I find it fascinating, actually, with Tuong's presence in the panel today. And I was thinking about the goal of this project is to allow accessibility and possibilities, right, for traditional music in Southeast Asia, for example, to flourish in other contexts. So, and part of that, as I was hearing Tuong speak, is revitalizing traditional music by working with traditional musicians or cultural preservers like Tuong, who is not working with electronic music and might not be so at first interested in this tool, right? But also the part of incorporating them into this project, into this work stream is actually, I think, one of the most important part of revitalizing music in general. So I wanted to ask a bit more about that part. Is there any, efforts similar to this to bring to the table artists who are working more directly with traditional acoustic instruments, for example, and to archive or to work with that.
Thank you. It's a really great question. I try to think about this more in terms of the knowledge rather than the music itself, and that's partly because there's a certain reaction that happens to people when you say traditional music, right? Very often there's a kind of rejection or oh, this is like old and irrelevant, right? So trying to think about the terminology that we use, back to the earlier question, helps us or enables us, I think, to engage with the content in a different way. So thinking about musical knowledge, there we have an open plane to explore. It's no longer put in a box, right? It's no longer defined in any kind of terms. It's musical knowledge. Is that musical knowledge related to a specific religious ceremony? Yes. or not? Is it related to an opera? Yes. What kind of opera? You know, trying to ask very open questions that give us space to dive into the subtleties, I think is really important. So, at the moment, there are no plans to actively engage with specific musicians or researchers because the resources are not available. But what I would, in the ideal dream scenario, there would be a network of practitioners, researchers who are interested in this subject, not only for the sake of preservation and archiving, but actually for finding new ways to transmit and to share and exchange the knowledge. Because if I don't want to generalize, right? But what generally happens, if I speak to people and say, hey, I'd like to come and talk to you about making electronic versions of traditional music, everybody's like, you know, traditional music, no thank you, you know, we want to be in the club. But what you heard from Victoria's work is phenomenal, right? When Victoria sent her track through